The 5 things that, from working with lots of parents who live apart, I think that we can all take from them. So number 1 is how to cope when your child prefers their other parent. Number 2 is how to enjoy the time that you have away from your child or children. Number 3 is how to support children spending nights away from a breast or chest feeding parent. Number 4, how to disagree with your child or children's other parent while remaining united. And 5, how to be honest with your children about difficult things. Now, hopefully some of those will be familiar to you, and I'd like to share some tips. So the first one, how to cope when your child prefers their other parent. Now, I think this is a universal experience for most parents. Children tend to go through stages where they may have a preferred parent or not. And the reason why I think it's useful to turn to see how families who have 2 separate homes deal with this issue is because there is a bigger practical impact when a child is showing a strong preference for just one parent in families like this. So although it might look just like a reluctance to sort of go to that parent when they're unwell or something like that, it can have a huge sort of practical implication if a child just refuses to go to the other parent's house. And the other reason that looking to families where the parents are living apart is useful is because often the dynamics are such that children sort of exhibit this preference, and we can sort of understand underneath why it might be happening a bit more. So often there'll be a situation when a child has more than one home where one parent does more of their day-to-day routine, their homework, their meal times, their bedtimes, and you might get another one who sees them at the weekend more, perhaps, and they get to do more fun things or have more time in the holidays with them. And I've put here about struggling with transitions between homes, which is what I was talking about, where, again, it's not just a matter of a child saying, oh, you know, I want mummy to do bath time. It's going to have bigger practical implications, but we can see that, you know, that may well be coming from a child struggling with the transition of going between their homes. Now, the most helpful thing that we can see and we can learn from families where the parents are living apart is that the most important thing for children is that they know that both of their parents support their relationship with the other parent. And it sounds obvious, but if you're the parent who's being rejected in favour of the other parent, it can actually be really hard to say, no, I really want you to have a good, strong relationship with that other parent, and that's great that you want to go to them, and they're a great parent, and I can see why you love them so much. But we see that the problem is that when parents don't do that, is the children pick up on, oh, this parent isn't so keen on me going to spend time with my other parent. And I've put here about a survival mechanism. I'll just be brief. It's obviously a big issue, but we know that children have a very strong sense of where their shelter, food, and comfort is coming from. And if they're in one parent's house and they know where it's coming from, they're unlikely to say anything to that parent that is going to risk it or upset them. And obviously we know we're not going to not give them their supper if they say something about dad, but they don't necessarily know that. And so that can lead to a situation where if the child picks up on the sense that one parent has some mixed feelings about the other parent, then the child may feel they have to pick sides. So the third point here is my suggestion always is to have a look at the practical arrangements first, because it's so easy to tweak them. There are so many things that you can have a look at and fiddle with and see whether it helps sort of resolve this parental preference thing, you know, whether it's time of the day or routine or that sort of thing. And if you tweak those practical things and you find, okay, you know, with a different parent picking them up from nursery, we seem to have reversed this preference or got rid of it altogether, then great. But if you don't, then you need to dig a bit deeper and work out what's going on for the child. So my tip for number one is to be sympathetic to the other parent's position. No one wants to be either the rejected parent, obviously, by your child. It's incredibly hurtful. But also, nobody wants to be the overwhelmed parent who always has to force separation with the child, or is just completely overwhelmed by the child wanting to be with them the whole time. So if you can empathise with the other parent, that will also set you in good stead, because it might be you next. Okay, number two is how to enjoy time away from your children. And you tend to see, with all parents, I tend to see either a parent saying, I could never imagine spending regular periods of time away from my child, or parents who say, I do, or I want to, and I feel quite guilty about that. So it's important that parents know it is very common to fall somewhere on that spectrum. Now, the reason why it's useful for all of us who might struggle with one of those things to look to parents who live apart is because inbuilt in their family life, there's likely to be regular periods where their children aren't with them. And it is difficult, and I hear parents saying to me, well, I'm not going to leave a relationship that I'm not necessarily happy in because I can't imagine not living with my children full time. And so it's a big factor. But once that is built into your family life, then parents often report that really that time away from their children gives them the rest they need to be the sole parent when the child's with them. And again, I asked the parents that I work with sort of how they really enjoy and make the most of that time that their children are away from them. And everyone's different, but some examples are planning lots, so you're staying busy, scheduling work so that you can really kind of dig deep when they're not with you, or other things that you can't do with a child around. So for parents who are no longer in a romantic relationship with each other, that's often spending time with a new partner. But it can be, if you've got time away from even your partner, you can see friends or go out in the evening or do something you'd never think of doing with your child. So my tip for enjoying your time away from your children is to work out what type of parent you are. Are you the kind of parent who can delegate, and when the child's not with you, you just, without sounding bad, don't think about them, you completely just get on with your day, maybe it's so busy? Or are you the kind of parent who likes to sort of psychically follow their movements and be thinking and know sort of how school's been, for example, before they get on with the rest of their day? And if you know that about yourself, you know which of those two is easier for you to relax, then you can ask the person that your child's with to help facilitate that for you. Number three, how to support children spending nights away from a breast or chest feeding parent. Now, this issue often arises for all families, that there is a parent that either breast or chest feeds the child and there's a parent that doesn't. But the reason why it's useful to look to families where the parents are living apart for guidance is because the issue often arises when the child's much younger. And again, there's less of a grey area. There are two homes, and so the sort of practical implications of the child being away from the breast or chest feeding parent maybe feel more significant. What I like to remind parents in this situation is that they have the same goal. Both parents are going to want the child to feel comfortable overnight with either one. Going back to the thing before about parental preference, it's not ideal for either parent to either feel rejected or feel like they can never ever leave the house in the evening or overnight because the child needs them so much. So remembering as a common goal that you're both working towards. And the reason why issues arise is because parents bring to this situation different fears they may have about the child being upset or about their parenting abilities, different beliefs about sort of what's the most appropriate way for a child to fall asleep or what the concerns are. And there is so much research in terms of these issues and child and sleep that basically you'll be able to find some research to support whatever you feel anyway. So research really isn't going to solve this issue for parents. So what I bring to parents in this situation are practical tips that can be implemented before the overnight stay and during the overnight stay that help both parents feel more comfortable with giving it a go. And these are things like where the overnight's going to take place, when, the age of the child, how it's going to take place. So you can come up with as much detail as you like and agree these things in advance. And whether or not there might be a kind of escape valve or a ripcord during the overnight where if things don't go to plan, the other parent is involved again. I share a lot more of these sort of practical tips to be thinking about in an audio blog on the subject, which is on my YouTube channel. My tip, though, is to work out whether your child or this particular child of your children is the kind of child where they want to keep routines as similar as possible between their parent who breasts or chest feeds them and their other parent, whether they want their routines to be as similar as possible or whether they want them to be completely different and how the child settles best. You'll find some children who want to have exactly the same bedtime routine with both parents and then just the last bit of feeding might differ, or you might find children who that really triggers them because they get to the end of the routine and they look for that parent, and that child might need just completely different sleep aids at the other parent's house, and you can try that out. But once you've worked out which your child is more like, then you can kind of agree with the other parent how you're going to go. So number 4, this is a big one. How to disagree with your child or children's other parent while remaining united. And although we hear a lot about parents who live apart who can't agree, actually, and I speak for myself and everyone I know, agreeing every single aspect of parenting with your child's other parent is going to be impossible. So the key is you are going to disagree, and how can you do that while remaining united? And why it's useful to look to those families where the parents live apart is because when the parents are no longer are not in a romantic relationship with each other or never have been, then it can be easier for them to separate out their expectations of the other person. So rather than one person being both a partner and a parent, if you're not in a romantic relationship with that person, then they can just be the parent to your child. And that can be a lot easier because there's going to be things that conflict where maybe as a partner you want something, but that conflicts with what you would want for your child by way of their relationship with the parent. And you might want different things in a parent and in a partner, and in a parent of your child. So again, looking at how it works for parents who aren't in a romantic relationship with each other and seeing how we can kind of take hints and tips from that, is separating out these roles. And so thinking, well, actually, this person is predominantly my child's other parent at the moment, or today, or in this hour. And so I'll look for support and the other things that I might expect from a partner in other relationships. So in my friendships or in that other sort of peer group things. And also, if you're imagining, well, actually, these two roles are quite difficult to reconcile in one person, but you can try and set aside time to spend time with that person as a partner rather than as a parent, as if they were an entirely different person. And that can help you separate out your expectations of them. And my tip for this one is to be aware of how your child and their other parent feel supported. And some people call these love languages, or there's, you know, various ways of thinking about it. But there's no point trying to be a good partner if you're using acts of service as your love language, if the other person, for them, it's touch or quality time. So if you're aware of how the other people in the relationship sort of feel and interpret love, then it can help you, can help things be a bit more harmonious. Okay, and finally, how to be honest with your children or child about difficult things. Now, it's so natural as a parent to want to shield your child from things that you think are bad. And obviously a large part of that is really important and really good. The difficulty arises when we want so hard to present our child with a perfect image of the world, that there is a conflict between their instincts about what's going on and what they are able to pick up about a situation, and what the adults in their lives are saying about it, and that can cause a real dissonance in children. If, you know, mummy and daddy say, "Oh no, we love each other," but then the child's seeing them, you know, not seeming like they love each other very much. And although this happens again, this desire to want to shield, the reason why we can learn a lot from parents who live apart is because the change that happens in those families are so visible that it can't be denied, and it has to be out in the open, and the child has to have these. And that is invariably the first question that parents have. You know, how do we tell the children? And this desire to find the right words and not do it wrong and not say the wrong thing is really strong. But the positive is that once those conversations are happening and they are out in the open, then that can be the most important thing. It's actually reflecting back to the child that their instincts and their experience are correct, and really validate their experience. So learning that there isn't going to be a perfect script that you can say in order to, and it's also not ideal to just keep things quiet, but actually how positive it can be for a child just to have what their experience is confirmed. So my tip for this final, number 5, is to be aware that this desire to want to protect your children can create guilt as a parent when negative things do happen, and that can lead to a desire to sort of underestimate actually how big a deal it is for children. And we see that a lot, I think, in society, just this general idea that parental divorce is a very common childhood experience and the children feel okay. And I think a lot of that comes from us as adults, either as parents or just, you know, adults in society feeling guilty about what it's like for children. So it's really important that we're aware of that and make sure that we're not minimizing what the experience is for the child.